All right, let's give everybody maybe another minute. I started us off with a springtime picture because this will be here soon, even though it's cold and rainy today. How soon? We don't know. I think last year we had an early start to our blossom season. Jeremy, you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong.
The peak tree pollen day was early as expected, but as far as the bloom or the blossom date in DC, I don't have that off the back of my hand like I do the pollen date usually.
No,
I'm not that nerdy, Brienne, okay, even though I am.
Speaking of nerdy, please stick around because I have a joke that is going to blow your socks off. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. We actually have more people on the meeting now than responded to the invite, which is awesome. So as we do our intro stuff like normal, feel free to go ahead and take this survey. I'm going to talk more about this towards the end of the meeting. We're definitely not going to use the full 2 hours or even hour and a half today, but we wanted to reserve the time if you all would like it. Feel free to go ahead and do the survey while we're doing our kind of intro / check-in. So, and just for anyone who didn't hear me, I apologize in advance about my voice. And if it cuts out at any point, Dawn and David, feel free to jump in if you'd like, or Jen, if you have a joke lined up, take it away. So welcome everyone to the first Environment Working Group meeting of 2022. This is actually one of our last meetings, which is good but sad because we are nearing the end of the process to develop the RVAgreen 2050 plan, which is really exciting. You have access to these slides in the meeting invite. Unfortunately, it looks like chat has been disabled in Microsoft Teams for everyone. So feel free to use the raise hand function, which if you click on the 3 little dots at the top of your screen, I think will appear maybe, or just shout out if you have a question. Or as always, put it in that second slide in the slideshow and we'll respond to the full group when we circle back with resources. So thanks everybody for joining. For today, we are going to start off with your updates. Really excited to hear about what you all have been working on over the last few months since we last met, and anything you have coming up that you think would be of interest to the group. Today, we're going to be introducing and orienting everyone to the draft Climate Action Plan 2030. So the first plan of the RVAgreen 2050 initiative, which is really exciting. We've been working on this as a staff team over the last few months and are really excited to get your eyes on it. And then we're going to have a little bit of discussion around what's next for the plan, both in terms of community engagement and advocacy to get this thing adopted. And then we'll wrap up again, probably not using the whole time that we reserved today, but it's here if you all would like it. So our objectives for today, again, just providing the space to give you updates on RVAgreen 2050 as an initiative. We're going to orient you to the draft plan, which we will be sending a link to later. It's a massive document and we're still putting the final or sort of finishing touches on it right now. And also starting to talk about, again, what's next for April and beyond to get this adopted by both the community and city leadership. So as always, our ground rules are here. Please feel free to add at any time. We're going to start. Let's just go ahead and get into this for now. Your updates. So we want to hear what you've been working on since we last met in November. Anything interesting you have coming up. Take it away. Feel free to add notes here. We'll include things that are relevant in like our newsletter, social media, all of that. But this is also your space to chime in. So I'm going to actually stop sharing my screen so we can see more faces. Whoever would like to can get us started.
I'm not doing an update. I'm having lunch. I'll do my update later, but just so you know why and the things.
No worries. Thanks, Rob. We'll have some time at the end as well. Jeremy, I know you have something coming up, right? Maybe. with the National Climate Assessment?
Yes, thank you. I was wondering what thing you were referencing. So yeah, everyone, I'm Jeremy Hoffman. I'm the David and Jane Cohn Science Museum. I am leading the 5th National Climate Assessment's Southeast chapter, and we currently have our zero order draft up for public comment. If you would like to send that around to your networks, people can go to review.globalchange.gov. That's review.globalchange.gov. Register for an account and then read and submit written comments on what is currently in our zero order draft. That is open for public comment until the 20th of February. And there won't be another chance for public input on the direction of the chapters until the 3rd order draft, which will be sometime in late 2022, early 2023. So this is really an opportunity for you as local practitioners and with keepers of immense networks of environmentally minded folks to pass this opportunity along so that we ensure that we're getting the most direct public input as we can at this particular juncture in time. And I just will say it's super exciting to be leading this effort. I'm the only person, to my knowledge, from a museum background that has led a national climate assessment chapter. So it's kind of a special thing, not only for our region, but for Richmond specifically, to have this kind of like opportunity to frame a national contribution to a report like this. Thanks, Brianne.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeremy. I see we have an update from RVH2O that I'll let Jen talk about in a second if you want. Is anyone involved in the upcoming Environmental Film Festival? Is there anything going on there we should know about? It's shaking. Our office is actually co-hosting with Richmond Public Library a virtual screening of The Sacrifice Zone on March 4th. So we'll be closing out the film festival week and a half-ish with that. David from our office is going to be speaking along with a few other folks.
Hey, Brian, it's Justin from the James River Association. Yeah, we're participating in the Environmental Film Festival this year. We are screening 8 Billion Angels on Friday, February 18th. And we'll have, I think the filmmaker is going to join us for a discussion at the conclusion of the screening, which is awesome. I'll also say that we released this 2021 State of the James last fall. And what we're finding in the indicators that we track is, in some of the indicators that we track, is that climate change, and particularly the heavy rainfall that we've been seeing in recent years, is impacting some of the indicators. So take a look at the 2021 State of the James report if you're interested. I'll also say that in partnership with Groundwork RVA, Rob and his awesome team, we planted more street trees on Menifee Street associated with the Belmead Green Street project back in November. If you haven't been over there to check out that project, go check it out. It's looking great, and Rob and his team are maintaining it for the next few years. So it's in good hands now. And then the last thing I'll say is that the Greening Richmond Public Libraries project continues to move forward. Construction is currently underway at Broad Rock Branch, North Avenue Branch, and in the very near future, West End Branch. Plans that were created last year for each of the 3 libraries are being implemented, and they feature stormwater management practices and just general green infrastructure practices. So we haven't issued a press release about those projects yet. We're going to wait until late February, early March, so that we can recruit some volunteers to help with the actual planting of the shrubs and trees and perennials that'll go in the ground at each of the 3 libraries.
Perfect. All awesome. Anyone else?
Sure. Hi, I'm Wyatt with VCU Sustainability Office, and I just thought I'd share we're very close to launching the VCU sustainability planning process. So that's going to be 12 to 18 months, and we're going to do a sustainability strategic plan that includes the university and the VCU health system. So this will be the first time that we're combining those organizations in one sustainability plan, which will be pretty exciting. And we're going to announce that launch, I think, later this month, and we're bringing on a outside consultant to help us. So yeah, hopefully some good things will come out of that. And I'm sure folks on this call will be hearing from our office asking for y'all's input. So stay tuned.
Awesome. Very exciting. Anybody else?
I could go just quickly. I'm Peter from Capital Region Land Conservancy. Last week we announced, or the National Park Service announced, that they purchased the last 371 acres from Capital Region Land Conservancy's original purchase of 870 acres at Malvern Hill Farm. So CRLC no longer holds any of that land. That land that was transferred to the National Park Service will be added to the Richmond National Battlefield Park. And the other several hundred acres have been transferred to Henrico County for their parks, and a portion to the James River Association. So it's exciting to have that project wrapped up, and for it to be nationally recognized land as well, joining, I think it's 1,300 acres now that the National Park Service has out there. Pretty exciting.
Thanks, Peter.
It was hard to think of a win for stormwater utility, like a straight out win. But one, or a series of them that we have, is we've gotten a few of the Virginia Community Flood Preparedness Fund grants, which is exciting. One is for the actual work, which is great, and a few are for surveying and planning purposes, also great. But the one that's for work is at McGuire and Chapel Drive in the 8th District, so we're super excited about that. It's $12.5 million, so that stretches our dollar and your dollar way further to be able to bring that project to life without having to fight for funding or search for it. So we think that's exciting. That's in the 8th, if I didn't already repeat myself once. So that's a clear win for us, with no strings attached, which is great.
Awesome. Yeah, huge win. Money.
Jen, what is that? You said that's just for planning, or is that for actually doing a planned project?
So the 12.5 for McGuire and Chapel Drive is for a planned project. That's for construction costs. So
cool.
Yeah.
Is there a place to see what you're going to do?
Yes, I will put the link in our little beautiful spreadsheet from Brianne. We've got all of our projects up on our handy dandy website. And then the planning, I can find the links for those. Those are a little more varied through our water resources department. So like flood wall surveying and some floodplain management stuff.
And I can, any links that end up in here, I can share after the meeting as well for everybody. So. Cool. Rob, you're done eating. Did you have anything you wanted to share? If not, that's fine.
Lots of things. So Jen, all of that stuff, and as you're looking at planning and things like that, we would love, I'm curious about overlap between that work and the whole, we're identifying where green infrastructure needs to go in the world work, and how to sort of be part of that conversation, because we're in a place where one of the things that we're looking at now is moving forward on our green infrastructure apprenticeship program. So we're part of install on the best bioswale ever there on Menifee Street. If you go look at it, it's just a stupendous and tremendous, and we're upping that skill set and trying to bring more young folks into that world. And so trying to sort of be thinking about where it makes sense and where to connect projects would be lovely. The other thing is that many of you know Melissa Guevara, who has been our green team and youth person forever and ever and ever, and still is, but is also transitioning to be more remote. And we have found a successor whose name is Rosa Roncalles, who will be hopefully joining you all on Friday in the community slot right? And so, but over the next weeks or so, we will be sort of approaching many of you to say, hey, tell Rosa who you are and what you do, so that she can kind of have a sense of how things are working and stuff like that. I'll stop there.
Awesome. Looking forward to meeting Rosa. Let me know if we can do anything to help with her onboarding as part of this project, obviously. Cool. Anyone else? These are all great. All right, so feel free to keep adding. I will share relevant links and that sort of thing in my email to everybody after the meeting. I will have some time at the end too if you want to share anything upcoming that we can promote on our social media, newsletter, that sort of thing. So for now, let's do a quick review of where we are in the RVAgreen 2050 process. We do have a couple of new faces, a couple of on the meeting today, couple of interns, potential interns, other guests, I think. So this is new for some and a refresher for most of you. We have come really far in the process. We're almost at the end. So right now we are in this phase of drafting the plan, which we are going to introduce to you today, and getting feedback on that draft, which is what you all will be providing to us over the next couple weeks. All of this is in preparation to take it out to the entire Richmond community in April, and I'll talk more about what that will look like, to build, to get input, build our audience, and build support for finalization, adoption, and approval in the summer and probably early fall, given City Council's schedule. So without further ado, and again, I'm going to send a link to the actual plan document because it's gigantic after this meeting. What I want to do for the next few slides is just introduce the plan itself, its structure, and a couple things that we thought might be relevant to you all as you take a look at it, because it is really long. It's 178 pages. It is a lot of like formatting and pictures and all of that stuff. So I'm going to preview a couple of sections that I think will be the ones that you'll want to take the sort of closest look at as you do your review. So this is our, again, all of this is draft, I should say. So our team has been working on this over the last, probably since around Thanksgiving. This is like all we've been doing. We have also been fortunate to work with a professional graphic designer on this over the last month or so. But we're still doing it, primarily ourselves. So I'll just say from the outset that it's definitely not perfect. It's going to be proofread and professionally copy edited and all that. But for now, it's really just us generating the content from all of the amazing input that you all have given us. So that's all to say this is still a draft and subject to change. That said, one of the first things that you'll want to look at in the plan itself is the content that you all were primarily responsible for. And those are the objectives, strategies, actions, and other details that are in the environment pathway. So we have a portion in the plan that is dedicated to the plan itself. We have a lot. Let me go back up to the table of contents. We have a lot of information in here, and as we talked about back in November, we wanted to really get down on paper / electronic PDF document everything that we could to help ourselves remember where we've been and the lessons we've learned, help other city departments do planning in a better way, hopefully moving forward, and identify any of those details that are going to help us in implementation, help you all, do your work in terms of data availability, the whole process. And so that's why there's a ton of content in here that we hope will be helpful to you as well. The actual plan part, the action plan, is about midway through the document. And so that's what I'm going to start with first. So first, sorry, I don't think this is probably showing up very well on your end, but you'll see this is just a quick overview and you'll be able to see this in detail later today. We have a guide to the action plan because there's a lot of information that we're trying to communicate about each of our strategies and actions. And so it just labels like, this is what this symbol means. This is where you can find this kind of information, that sort of thing. And then within each of our 5 pathways, we have the pathway name and tagline or description. We have a listing of the objectives. So none of this should be new, I should add. You all have seen this content many, many times, and now it just looks nice in a document. So we have our objectives, and then the following pages, excuse me, will be more detail on each objective. So we have, for example, under environment, our first objective is to make sure all residents have the opportunity to engage with healthy natural resources, spaces, and biodiversity. For each objective, we have this sort of checklist formatting that indicates which of our cross-cutting outcomes for RVAgreen 2050 are supported by the objective. So again, these 12 outcomes that we have listed, we want to see as a result of implementation of the plan as a whole. And then for each objective, we have the strategies that are under that. So we're getting more and more detailed in terms of the action we'll be taking as you go deeper into the plan. So this is at the objective level. Then once you sort of flip the page, then you get into the strategy. So we have pathway, objective, strategy. For each strategy is its own page. We have the actual strategy language. We have some context language that you all helped with at our last meeting when we had you do that kind of silly activity about getting adopted by city council and why this is important. We just wanted to provide some context for each strategy for people who may not have as much technical knowledge, for someone who might be looking at this really quickly and being like, why this one? I'll also add that we have some cool artwork that was done by VCU students last semester that we have kind of sprinkled throughout the plan as well. And then under each strategy, we have our actions, and each action has a status, the city steward, which is the city department primarily responsible for implementation, a cost range, a time range for implementation, and then symbols indicating the impacts that this action will have in the areas of greenhouse gas emissions reduction, climate resilience, and equity, or our community priorities. I'll just flip back quickly to this page, which is at the beginning of this section. And again, this points out what each symbol means, what the cost ranges are, and what each of these little icons means for resilience and equity. So, you know, this is a huge document. We know there's going to be some flipping back and forth. I think that the web version of this, whatever it becomes, we're going to be working on that next, will probably be more accessible in terms of quickly referencing. Like maybe you can hover over something and it tells you, okay, this is what this, you know, symbol means or something like that. So going back to where I was here, this is as detailed as the primary part of the plan is going to be. We get down to the action level with these details. So that is the meat of the plan, as we've been calling it. I just wanted to also show, again, you all have seen this several times. Under environment, we have these 4 objectives and these nine strategies, and then there are several actions under each strategy. So that will be the part that we'll be asking you to take a look at and just make sure, does this reflect your work? It should, because we really haven't changed much since you last saw it. We may have done some, you know, kind of organization, making the text more concise, changing language to make it more accessible, hopefully. But we do want some input on that if you see opportunities for improvement as well. Before I introduce a couple of sections of new content, does anyone have any questions about this aspect or section of the plan? All right, so we're here if you do have questions, and I know this will be a lot easier to respond to once you can actually get your hands on the document, and we'll have that for you later today. So The other couple of things that we thought might be of interest to you to take a look at are two pieces of newer content. Well, I'll explain it as we go, but this is content that you haven't seen in its entirety before, and we just wanted to make sure, one, that you saw it, and two, have the opportunity to let us know your feedback if you do have any. And this is under the section that follows the main strategies and actions section, and we're calling it accountability and measuring progress. And this whole section is designed to answer a question that I think one of you might have brought up very early on, which is, this is all, good and well, but how do we make sure that this actually happens? And what does that look like? So the first part of this is our outcomes and indicators. Again, I know this is a lot, but just wanted to show you what this looks like. You've seen the outcomes before. These are our 12 cross-cutting results that we want to see as RVAgreen 2050 is implemented. What you haven't seen in its kind of final form are all of the indicators. You all had a ton of input on these, and we took all of that into account as we identified what specific data points we will be tracking over the next 8 years to measure progress towards these outcomes. So we're not going to go through these in detail right now, and you have seen some of this, but we just wanted to let you know that this has been finalized since you last saw it. And then the other piece is one that I don't think we had presented to all of the working groups at our last meeting. This is something that we worked on with our Racial Equity and Environmental Justice Roundtable members over kind of November and December. And this is a section that we're calling our Shared Accountability Framework. So this is a tool, or whatever you want to call it, that is designed to answer the question, who is responsible for what as part of implementing RVAgreen 2050? And it was really important. We heard from you all, we heard from the roundtable, and in terms of best practices for these kinds of plans, that we make sure that this is part of the plan so that it doesn't just end with that list of 49, I think, strategies and over 100 actions. We're being really specific about the roles and responsibilities of all of the implementers for RVAgreen 2050 with this framework. So it starts off with a few kind of broad commitments around regular evaluation. So this includes things like the indicators that we mentioned, transparency. So all of this is public. It's all going to be out there, good or bad. Culture of improvement. So as we've been doing this whole time, we know we're not doing this perfectly. We know this plan isn't perfect, and we want it to be flexible and iterative as we continue into implementation. We also want this to be a tool that can help us build relationships and build trust with the community. And then also one that's particularly important, I think, for sort of internal purposes is institutionalizing sustainability in city government. So I'll go to this next slide, which has some more details on all of these commitments. I'll also add, for anyone who hasn't heard this update, that as of July 1st of this year, our office, the Office of Sustainability, will finally be permanent within the city of Richmond. We have been a sort of like project or program within the operations portfolio since we were founded over 10 years ago. And so this is a really great step forward for us and very exciting. So as part of all that, we want to continue kind of spreading the word of both RVAgreen 2050, but also just general sustainability across city government. So these are our commitments with the shared accountability framework. And when I say we, it's the entire sort of Richmond community, all of RVAgreen 2050. And within that we've broken down the specific responsibilities that we could identify as part of implementation. So the shared accountability framework is broken up into two sort of components. We have the who is responsible, and then we have what are those, what is that actor responsible for? So I'll just go through this, and then we'll have a chance for discussion after this, and then you'll have access to this as well as you do your review. So we start with our office. We have, and will continue to be the primary sort of champion convener around RVAgreen 2050, and the implementation of the plan will be supporting both internal city actors and community actors in that implementation. We will be working on that institutionalization of sustainability across city government. Will be the primary sort of place and staff support for bringing together the people who are implementing on a regular basis to do things like reporting, but also checking in. Is this working in a way that supports community priorities? If not, do we need to change it? How does that get communicated to our community so that we can maintain transparency? All of those sorts of things. We're thinking that we will do regular convenings of the implementers of the plan, which I'll talk more about in a second, as well as annual sort of updates, both in terms of the plan and progress. So like an annual progress report, some sort of maybe convening to bring people together to a table to talk about this. I've seen so many of your faces in lots of other meetings around lots of topics across the city. So we could potentially be like a place to bring everything together and build that community. We'd also like to do an annual survey of the entire community to get a gauge on how RVAgreen 2050, how this sort of area of work of equitable climate action resilience is getting out to the community. You know, what's the awareness level? What's the support level? Are we doing what we want in terms of making sure we're addressing community priorities and that sort of thing? And then we'll be providing updates, not just to the community, but also to several other specific bodies that will be listed as part of this shared accountability framework as well. So then moving down into our additional kind of actors within this shared accountability framework, we will have implementation teams, which don't exist right now, but these will be the folks who are implementing the strategies. So we will take one strategy and say, okay, you know, this city department is the primary sort of implementer in terms of the policy program at the city level, but we also need X, Y, and Z from other city departments, community groups, residents, whoever it may be, to make sure the implementation is successful and equitable. The implementation teams will use some of the tools that we've built along the way and continue to improve them. And then our office will continue to support these folks throughout implementation as well. And then we will also have some sort of continuing version of our racial equity and environmental justice roundtable. So this group of folks has been, and I think we have a couple of them on the call today, have been really instrumental in helping us make this process so far more equitable, more relevant to Richmonders. And we want to make sure that we keep that sort of accountability and in the implementation process as well. So this group will continue on supporting the overall process, but also these implementation teams and kind of having that real world check on what we're doing. So yes, we can gather all the technical data we want. We can identify sort of 1, 2, 3, here are the steps we need to take to implement this. But to make that successful, what does that look like, you know, especially at the neighborhood level? Because a lot of our strategies will be neighborhood specific in terms of where we have priorities, where we have differing priorities and that sort of thing. And this group will continue to be paid for their time and lived experience expertise that is being contributed to this process. So we have a section on lessons learned in the plan, and one of them is around paying people for their time. Obviously, it's a best practice. We want to continue doing it. It has been difficult, so I'm hoping that with implementation, we can make that process more of a habit, or whatever the word is, that city government is doing this to compensate people for their time. So, and again, this is all draft. We're going to want input on this as well. Before I move into the additional set of actors as part of this shared accountability framework, does anyone have any questions or comments so far? This is really my excuse to take a cough break. So 1 second. All right, so just finishing this up.
Oh, sorry. That was me coughing. You know, I'd never open the mic if you don't
Go for it.
to
Yeah.
hear. Yeah. So the implementation teams piece feels to me like a place to pay attention, because it could be that many of us are part of implementation teams, number one, and number two, should I be diplomatic or should I just say the word?
Say it.
Jen Clark. Words? Okay.
Oh yeah, no
all right,
diplomacy here, Rob.
All right. So, you know, I love us and we love us, and a lot of this is dependent on people, not us, to do. And we're kind of giving them work. So, yeah. I mean, so just all of those pieces, especially when it gets down to implementation. I mean, there's two pieces. One is like who's signed off from all the other places, but kind of more, what are we counting and who's doing and all of that kind of stuff, because there are a lot of people in the space and they're not all people that, even if you had like the mayoralty and it was Mayor Brienne, might not even be able to get it all done, right? So and I don't have an answer, but it feels important.
Yeah.
Because it feels like something that we could easily kind of gloss over and then like, oh, slippery banana peel.
Yeah, appreciate that. Thank you, Rob. And yes, I agree. I was just looking at this like that's a kind of small section for the big job of doing this implementation. So yes, I don't have the answer either. I think we could flesh this out more. Also, the next step, which I'll talk more about this in a few slides, but the next step after you all do your review will be an internal city review, which we've done a couple times now with various versions of this over the years. And this will be one where we specifically target outreach to the city stewards who are listed in the document to say, you are here, FYI, you know, doing that kind of check, but also being available to engage with these departments that maybe haven't had either the opportunity or the bandwidth or whatever it is as part of this process. Because we did really wide-reaching outreach to other departments at the beginning, but we know that it's been a long journey, and this gets really nitty-gritty sometimes. So hopefully that will help. That review will also include the leadership from those departments. So hopefully that will just put us in the right direction. But thank you, Rob, for that comment. Anyone else? Okay, I'm gonna make it, I promise. Okay, so excuse me. Actually, Dawn, do you mind doing this slide? I can chime in. I'm just gonna get a cough drop.
Sure. So these are just the different actors that we've identified for this shared accountability framework that she's been walking you through. The mayor and chief administrative officer obviously are essential. Getting their buy-in, you know, the climate emergency resolution that was passed in September was a great step in the right direction. Getting our office memorialized or institutionalized. So those are the kinds of things that are, you know, making us hopeful that this really is that they agree to be accountable with us. And of course, City Council ensuring the overall accountability through adoption. That's where we get the go-ahead. Once this is adopted, we can start incorporating budget requests and, you know, assigning priorities to departments and agencies. Aligning this work with all of the other work going on in the city departments. The Planning Commission is going to be important. We're hopefully gonna adopt, I don't know how it works, but getting this action plan adopted into the Richmond 300 master plan. So that's, as you know, we've been kind of aligning this work with Richmond 300 all along. So I think it's a great idea. Planning suggested it, and so that will help us be even more successful. So again, another opportunity for that accountability. The annual reporting that they do every, and the 5-year updates. The Green City Commission is important at the council level, obviously, and then of course the Richmond community participating in the planning and implementation and updating process. And Rob, I really appreciate what you were saying about that team, because I know that last summer when we were talking in our working groups about those stakeholders or implementation partners, it did generate a lot of questions about who that is. And we don't want to assign work to anyone, of course, but we want to make sure that we are inviting the important actors to the table. So that's an important ongoing conversation to have. Anything else, Brianne, that I missed?
No, thank you, Dawn. I'll just add that in terms of what's happening next with the document, and this is over the next several months after you all, of course, have had your opportunity to review. So with that city staff and leadership review that I mentioned, which will happen in March, we're also going to be providing the draft to the mayor's office and the chief administrative officers and deputy chief administrative officers, as well as city council. So we learned an important lesson, I think, from Richmond 300. If anyone had been following this, or I guess is still following it, city council created a list of amendments that they wanted to see to Richmond 300 after its adoption. And I don't know all of the ins and outs of that process, obviously, but we just took that as kind of a lesson to make sure that city council members are, aware of this, which of course we've done our outreach to them throughout the process, but are able to see the document, get engaged in terms of what their district has said that they want, and be really targeted in that outreach as well. And then, yes, as Dawn said, so then the approval kind of process would go through the Planning Commission and have this adopted, I believe, as an amendment to Richmond 300, the master plan. Just gives it a little more teeth in terms of the document itself. So that's our shared accountability framework. Does anyone have any other questions or comments about that? For now, of course.
Brianne, can you go back to that last slide really quickly?
This one?
Yes. So I was thinking about what Rob commented about the implementation teams. I think it needs to be pretty clearly stated what the role of the community stakeholders is in the implementation teams. I think just in Richmond RVA vibes, it's really just making sure that the community knows what role they're playing and how they're advancing it it's going to be really helpful in the long term in like different parts of the community. That's a very broad thing just to say, and the community, just to put that into focus.
Perfect. Thanks, Wafame. I agree. Any other thoughts for now? All right, so that's the bulk of what you haven't seen before. A lot of the beginning portions of the plan are background information and supporting information. I'll add that we are going to have several appendices as part of this plan to make it even longer, of course, but this is going to have, oh no, I'm sorry, Dawn. Can you?
Okay, so yeah, the appendices, the 170 pages that she kind of showed you, those table of contents, that's the 170, and then the appendices are all the extra work that we want to make sure are captured for that documentation purpose, for different departments that want to write grants or community members who want to write grants. There's a lot in there to make sure that we include all the work that was done. So the definitions and acronyms for accessibility, the strategy implementation guide and template, that's going to be kind of a worksheet with, if you'll remember those activity sheets that we walked through, identifying equitable next steps and potential legislation that we should be made aware of, the funding and financing mapping, all of that work is going to be included in the appendix. The full list of strategies, all 188 that that you all developed last spring, that's in the appendix. Like we said, they would be the climate vulnerability and risk assessment. What else is down there? I can't read that tiny print. The equity screening tool, the equity assessment, and then the greenhouse gas emissions modeling deliverables that GreenLink put together. How they came up with all of that modeling. The details will be in there. The community engagement and outreach process detail. There's a lot of great lessons learned throughout this whole planning process that we want to make sure we document. And then, of course, the 2018 greenhouse gas emissions inventory that we're basing this on is included in there. Detailed methodologies for plan content, the impact mapping and all of the important, the strategy prioritization matrix. If you'll remember, we've done a lot, and it's important to us and the community and also other institutions that are trying to do the same work to just like we've been learning from others. This is an opportunity for others to learn from us. And then the city council resolution supporting climate action. I mentioned the climate emergency resolution, also the net zero resolution. So all of that great work will be in the appendix.
Thank you, Dawn, and I apologize, everyone. Anyone have any questions before we go into really what our ask is of you all now once we get this gigantic document out to you? Any questions about what we've talked about so far or what might be in the plan? All right, so we will obviously have time if anyone does have any questions. So what's next? We are going to be using Conveo. I know this is not everyone's favorite tool, but this is a massive PDF document. And we just thought it would be the most efficient way to have over 100 people take a look at it over the next few weeks. So I'll be sending an email later today with the link to the document. You will be able to download it as a PDF if you want from that platform. So feel free to do that. You'll be able to comment on it through Conveo. If for whatever reason you're not able to or just don't want to do that, you can also email us or comment on the PDF and somehow send that back. We can figure that out if you would like. Our ask to you is to take the next week, 2 weeks through February 18th. Take a look at the plan, and what we're asking primarily now, because you have seen the bulk of the content in terms of the strategies and actions, is to make sure that this reflects your work. Do you feel ownership of the content within the environment pathway? If we don't hear from you, we will assume yes. And again, none of it should be a surprise to you. We've been working on it for over a year now, and we want to make sure that what is in the document reflects all of your amazing contributions. So that'll be through February 18th. And in my email, of course, I'll put all of that information in there. Then the next step, like I said, will be a review by city staff and leadership. So you all kind of have your chance first, and then we'll be making sure that city departments are seeing where they are indicated as stewards of certain actions and have their voice in this as well. And then we'll be preparing for April, which is our final round of community-wide engagement on this plan. So we've had several rounds, 2020, April of 2021 on the draft strategies, and now we're bringing out this document to the community at large. So we want to talk a little bit more about that and get your feedback. This will be our only sort of like discussion and for today's meeting, and we'll wrap up once we're done through this. But we wanted to get your input on what we are setting out as our like sustainability office goals for this April 2022 final round of community engagement on this plan document. What we were thinking about is that we have been over multiple years asking the community to have their voice heard as part of this process through many different ways. And now we've arrived at this amazing, I think, but I'm biased, set of strategies and actions that we believe reflect what we've heard from the community. Of course, it's not perfect, and we know that people will have feedback on changes to make. We know that, and we hope that we will be bringing in new voices from the community, from communities that we haven't reached before. So we are leaving room for that. But at this point, we primarily are looking for that sort of buy-in piece. If there are things that we need to change, of course, we're flexible on that. But our bigger goals for this period are to in terms of that accountability piece, bring the plan back to the community and say, this is what we heard in terms of like your priorities. Does this reflect that? We also want to be raising awareness and building an advocacy community for the adoption process later in the summer, so that we can have people helping us with that. And then we will use any specific ideas or input on like the strategies as part of implementation. We know we're still collecting all of that information. So a lot of the discussions that we had, like your groups had probably last summer, fall, we got into a lot of really specific details, and we wanted to let you know that we haven't lost that information. We're keeping that so that we can hand it off to the implementation teams as part of that process. So we'll still be building that sort of repository of information as well. So what we want to do now is just take a few minutes and get your, any reflections you have on these goals that we've set out for the April 22 engagement period. Learn if you have been doing any community engagement recently, what's been working, how are people feeling about, I don't know, in-person activities these days. Is there anything big happening we could align with in the April-May timeframe to build on this work? And can you anticipate any hurdles or blind spots that we may not be seeing, communities we haven't reached that we may not know about, that sort of thing. So we'll just open it up now. I'll be taking notes. And if you have any thoughts later, please feel free to reach out to us. I do want to say this is going to be our last working group meeting before April, and I'll talk more about that. So we wanted to get any thoughts that you all have now before we start preparing.
This is Maggie Hopkins. Sorry, I have my video off. I have a mini environmental working group member with me today. One thing that I've been finding successful in other cities doing community outreach during these pandemic times, I know we rely a lot on virtual meetings, and obviously not everyone has access to that, is leaving hard copies of materials in certain community places, and leaving just, notebooks and like composition notebooks, super low tech, easy stuff for people to be able to engage with on their own time, but not virtually.
Awesome. Thanks, Maggie. I love that idea. Any other thoughts for now?
I'll ask a question. So I see the parameters that we're looking for. Like, did we hear you correctly? Like, it's kind of a reflection and like checking back in. Everyone who, like, is that going to be front and center for everybody who reviews, whether online, in person, whatever? And then I guess one thought there would just be to try to make sure that everyone who's pushing this out on your behalf is including that in their messaging. Because I think that I can already see this hurdle of like, now's your last chance to chime in with what you think on this plan, and somebody wants something outrageous.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Yes, this is part of, I think, our like transparency and accountability goals. So we want to be transparent about what we are looking for at this point in the process. And I think that's a great idea to make sure that all of the sort of supporting materials and that sort of thing that we put out for both ourselves and our partners who are helping us get this out there, that's clear as well. So thanks, Jen.
So, we're really smart and we're really good and we did tremendous work and it's perfect. And commenting on it in 8 days is kind of a heavy lift, one. I get that. So my question, I have a question and then I'll have like, a dozen comments. The question is, how bad is it to have sort of multiple review things happening? Like, can you release it to the powers that be while we're still looking, or you want to make sure that we're done with it before that happens? I'll make the comments after you answer the question.
I'm not sure, but I think that's a good question, and it's something that we can circle back on as a team later today and get back to everybody on. That works.
Yep.
Cool.
And then the other, all of the sort of wind up around how smart we are and how good we are, was also to say that this is an issue that's moving and changing extraordinarily quickly. And what are we building in so that when we notice in 6 months that no, that's not right. We just missed the boat completely and has nothing to do with ill will anyplace, but we just didn't have the information and it's looking right. What are we building in there to be able to, yeah. So that's I guess that's another question or comment. And then I wanted to just the notion of, and you know me, Brianne. I mean, I'm always really good at making work for you, but it's part of how my life works. I'm not. I love the leaving hard copies. I'm not sure that leaving a 140-page document is really the best way to do that. So, is there some way to sort of pull out here's the juicy bits that had input and here's all the other stuff too, you're welcome to see that, but these are the things that we're saying we're gonna do, and we'd love for you to make sure that you see yourself in this work and and of course, I mean, if everybody in the world that should have been involved decides now in these 8 days, well, too bad, right? But it just feels like, yeah, so okay, that's enough for now.
Yeah, good questions. Thank you, Rob. Just a quick sort of on this hard copy idea. Did anyone was anyone participating in the process that Richmond 300 used, where they had like binders that people could look through and use again? Did anybody? Am I remembering that correctly? Did that work? Anybody? No. Okay. Well, I'll touch base with Maritza on that. But yes, I agree, Rob, that we can most likely pull out the non-background information that is and have that accessible in a different way. So, and then to your other question, I think that's also a good question that we should consider now. I think that's part of one of the things we're trying to think of, like what are those potential challenges that might come up between having a document that has been graphically designed and laid out and having that adopted in the next 6 to 8 months. Justin, I saw your hand up as well.
Brady, yeah, I was just going to say that we have some public programs and community engagement opportunities coming up this spring that may align with this effort. So maybe it's worth having a quick chat after this meeting or a quick email exchange to see if there's some opportunity there.
Yeah, awesome. That would be great. Anybody else for now? No. Okay, well, keep them coming. These are really helpful. We're at the beginning stages of. Go ahead, Rob.
And we are really smart and really great. I mean, this is exciting as hell. So thank you for. I mean, it's been a heavy, heavy, heavy lift. And again, I've been along for the ride. Haven't seen, haven't had time, and I'm not sure that I will have time between the 18th, honestly, to digest the thing. But it's pretty exciting, and thank you all so much. I mean, you especially, Brienne, but the whole team.
I was in my early 30s when I started this. That's strange. Jen.
And now you're a mom.
Oh my God, don't remind me.
I had another thought. In April 2021, when you did the engagement, there was like, how much time do you have? Like, do you want to give us a
Yes.
smiley face? Do you want to take this mini survey, or do you want to look at a lot of pages? Did you get good responses from multiple levels that way, or was it a bust in terms of effort?
So we have two kind of like elements of that. One, we've just kept going. Like on our website, it's like, if you have a minute, you can sign up for the emails. If you have 5 minutes, you can do this. That I think has been helpful just because we built it and it's there and hasn't really changed. Someone else from my team, if you remember, because I very quickly went out on maternity leave after our engagement period or during it last summer, I believe that we did have a fair number of responses to both survey options. So we had the 30-minute one and then the 10-minute one. We also had the Conveyo, like read the whole thing and comment on the PDF. We did not have a lot of people doing that, which makes sense because it was long. And then, so Dawn or David, if you remember any reflections on that, this is something we can go back to our notes on too. So good question.
I remember, well, the community support, criteria that we used in the priority matrix. We had, I think, 450 people that filled out the survey on some level. I think it was combined. And also the emails, like we got emails, some all the different engagement we kind of lumped together. David, do you remember any more details than that?
Yeah, I think, Jen, just to your question, I believe it was about equal in terms of response rate from the bigger survey versus the more pared down one, which was a bit of a surprise. But yeah, I think both found their people to answer, and it was generally equal.
Okay, I maybe pitch that, depending on how strapped for resources y'all feel, as a way to engage in spring, instead of being like, here's 170 pages and 10 appendixes, have fun. You'd have to pare down, and maybe all the working groups could chime in on what they thought was the most important part to ask about in 10 or 30 minutes. But if you want more eyes on it, it seems like that's going to be a good way.
Would it be possible to, or just on the planning side, to think of doing a phased approach of getting some community engagement? Because I know sometimes it takes a while for the community to catch on to what's going on around them, that it might be useful to, as those discussions start happening in community spaces and homes and wherever, and people are like, oh, I want to do this. And then oftentimes they're like, the window has closed. So would that be a possibility to consider?
Yeah, I like that idea, Wafame. And I think so it's kind of going to work out like that anyway, in some sense. So we were kind of thinking we need a deadline for this is when we're not changing the PDF anymore because we don't have any hours of the graphic designer left, or whatever it is. David and my skills are not that great in InDesign, so we're getting there. So this is it's almost combining this April engagement period, which is document focused, not 170 page document focused, but what are we're asking ourselves these questions right now as well. What are we asking the community to do or comment on, or what are the questions we're asking them during this period? And I think there's going to be some overlap between, well, there's this document, this plan, this set of strategies that you can specifically comment on. Broader than that, though, we are trying to build this community of support and buy-in for adoption, approval and adoption. And so I think that throughout this period of like April through August, I guess, or however the timeline works out, we'll be hopefully bringing new voices in continually to that space, while we, you know, kind of like set a deadline on the document, but then and simultaneously have this internal or whatever tracking system for like, okay, once we get to implementation, which is really going to be like we're going to go right there while adoption is happening. Here are the details we got from the community on this specific thing. So, but Wafame, I like that idea, and that's something that we can consider as we're planning this right now.
We can't be the only community struggling with this, right? I mean, sustainability planning is happening all over the country, and plenty of folks got out of the gate before we did, right? I mean, so there's got to be, you know, I mean, like how much rain is, you know, I mean, just I mean, that just is a silly thing, right? But it's not. Anyhow, it just feels like somebody out there has thought about iterative ways to both have a plan that is implementable, that has been adopted, that is clear, and is also amenable to like, this is all about climate change, right? Anyhow.
Yeah, good point. And yes, we have networks that we can tap into to ask how things are going. Cool. This is all great. So thank you all. We're at the beginning stages of thinking through this. So this is perfect. Any other comments for now? Questions? All right, so keep them coming via email. Let me know if you want to chat at any time. For now, we'll just go ahead and wrap up and offer some more space for anyone who wants to contribute thoughts or things coming up. So later today, I'll send you an email with the link to the Conveyo document, which again, you can download the PDF if you hate Conveyo, that's fine. We will also get back to you very shortly with the timeline and whether there is the potential to extend the review that the working groups are doing while we are simultaneously engaging internally with other city departments to do their review as well. So stay tuned for that. This is our last sort of like environment working group meeting until the engagement period. So we will be reaching out in the meantime, obviously. We're thinking of having in early April, before we start the engagement, one sort of all hands meeting for any working group members from any of the groups who are interested in attending and learning more about what our office's sort of plan for engagement is, what materials we've created to ask you all to help us with that engagement, provide an update on where we are in terms of the timeline and that sort of thing. That will be optional though. Our engagement period will most likely start the week of Earth Day, which is the 22nd. I think it's a Friday this year. So the Monday is like the 18th, and we're thinking it will continue through mid-May. And then we'll have one more working group meeting. It'll be our last one in June, to discuss sort of the results of the community engagement period and to talk about building advocacy for plan adoption and looking forward to implementation, and also planning the party that I've been promising you all for 2 years. So very important meeting happening in June. For now, I'll open up the space to anyone who, what, Rob?
Yeah, again, sorry, we're in this, and I'm kind of piggybacking on Wafame.
Yeah.
I think you, and I get it, I do, right? You've got back end deadlines, and we're trying to march and plan into those back end deadlines. And unless you've got more money than I think you do in terms of putting feet on the ground and people in community to do engagement, that's a very, very narrow window. and you want to, I'm not, so on the other hand, I was like, could you? Here, this isn't a could you, this is a you must. Figure out how to keep that window open longer for folks, because it's not going to happen. I mean, Richmond 300 was out for 9 months. Now, granted, we're not Richmond 300, right? But I mean, I would strongly urge you to tap in as you're planning your engagement, like long before like telling us what you're going to do. And B, 3 weeks, you're not going to get what you need.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just sorry. It's what you pay me for.
Mm-hmm. The big bucks. Yeah. Cool. Okay. Yes, thank you. And remind me, Richmond 300 was out, you mean like for public, like that input thing on, like they had a document, that sort of thing. Okay. All right, cool. So we can connect with Marie, the team who worked on that to see what that process was like for them. In terms of our resources, they are limited, but I hear you. So we are.
But because they're limited, that means us.
Mm-hmm.
Right, all of us, all the work, right? I mean, and that means sort of planning engagement in conjunction, right? Because yeah, that's that. And yeah, anyhow, I mean, you got it, I said it. We'll
Cool.
figure it out, but I think it has to be we'll figure it out. I think this isn't a place where you get, I mean, you obviously, it's right, you're the Office of Sustainability, I can't tell you what to do, but I can strongly go out there. Well, there's that sometimes too. Sorry, but yeah, right. I mean, anyhow.
Okay.
It's a theme. You get it.
Yeah, sounds good. And we can plan to, for those who are, because this is really valuable, and frankly, we didn't want to like take too much of y'all's time on this because you've already given us so much to get to this point in terms of the content for the document. But for those who have ideas, have input like this, and who want to have more conversation about our strategy for this next time period, we can definitely create space for that. So let us get back to you, and thank you, Rob, Wafame, and everyone. There will be potentially more meetings if you are interested. And we'll follow up.
Which is a good lead in for the volunteer survey,
Mhm.
because that's part of what that is. It's trying to be more, play a more impactful role on the engagement and what's next. So we could come up with a smaller team to help that.
Yes, so great idea, Dawn. So that was our last sort of ask for today. If you haven't already, there is a link in the at the beginning of the slide deck. Again, we can't use the chat for whatever reason. This is asking, we've already done a sort of less specific version of this, and so we do have some of your names for folks who were interested in helping with specific activities around engagement and also advocacy for the plan. Feel free to fill out that survey or just reach out to us if you have other specific ideas. We'll be collecting all of that information from all of the working groups and following up potentially with more focused meetings to come up with a strategy. What materials can we be providing, that sort of thing. So do that in our last couple minutes here, and I will offer up this space now for anyone who would like to share any other thoughts or reflections, but also any other updates, things you have upcoming for your group and that sort of thing.
I have one question that might be changing, but as you planned it would be great. I always say it wrong, conveyo, whichever.
I don't know. I heard someone say conveyo one time and I was like, okay.
I'll take it then. Would our comments be layered? So like working group first, is it going to say Jen? And then when it goes to DPU, is it also still going to say Jen from last week and Jen from this week as DPU? And then when it goes to the public, is it going to have okay, so it is iterative each time.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, so I don't, it will not the version that will be on Conveyo, that is on Conveyo for you all, is not the version that's going to be like for the entire community. We will be making changes based on your all's input at this point before it goes out to the community. So like, so that's the answer to the second question. So the first one, I don't know if we actually planned out a space to make changes between working group and roundtable review and city staff / leadership review because of our capacity and timeline. And especially if we, I think, want to leave more time for you all to do that, we probably won't be making changes. We can make notes to say, you know, this will change or something, but I think we will probably use separate documents. Does anyone see any issues with that? We can follow up with the actual plan if that would be helpful.
I will plan Jen? For either way. But might be good for anyone else to know that interesting people could be looking at our comments, or
yes,
interesting people will not be looking at your comments.
Yeah. This period, this Conveyo version is just for working groups and roundtable, which we are presenting to this week and next week. So, yeah.
Right. Thank you.
I've got a quick well, first of all, I want to say like thank you for all the work that your team has been doing, and I've really enjoyed having these working group meetings. One thing, I'm on a board for a nonprofit in the area where we serve girls 13 through 18, and I know they're really dying for connections and like community opportunities, and I'd love to be able to see if there's a way we can maybe incorporate some of our young folks to help mobilize some community feedback, especially since they're the ones that are going to be the most directly impacted by the RVA 2050, like the plans being rolled out. So I'm happy to brainstorm with you, Brianne, and the team about how we can possibly do that with high school folks and also maybe some of the local universities. It would take a lot less on our end if we have like a virtual like volunteer training 101, like what you'd need to do, how you'd need to talk to people in your community about this, and ways to just skills that they could learn right now too that help them feel like they're a part of the community. So I just want to put that out in the radar and volunteer myself to help kind of brainstorm that a little bit more.
Awesome. Love it. Yes. And youth, particularly 18 and under youth, is a community, a population that we have not reached as well as we would have liked to so far. So I've actually been talking to a few folks, I don't know if anyone's on this working group, about this in terms of longer term sort of RVAgreen 2050, but would love to talk with you, Mwafame, more about what we can do in the immediate term. So look out for an email. Any other questions, thoughts, updates for the group? No? All right.
What's even better than a talking dog?
Oh, I forgot.
A spelling bee.
I forgot my joke. Thank you for reminding me. Where does the hamburger go to dance? The meatball. Sorry.
Bada boom. We're back.
And she froze.
Thank goodness. I was so worried.
Corny that she
I knew there was
froze.
something missing.